It was the kind of morning that made people forget danger even existed. The sun hung lazily in the sky above Woodland Heights, bathing the quiet suburban streets in gold. Lawns glistened with dew, birds argued melodically from tree branches, and the soft whir of sprinklers lent the neighborhood a hypnotic calm. A few joggers passed by with earbuds in, coffee steam curled from paper cups on porches, and for a moment, the world felt utterly ordinary. But just beneath that stillness, something waited, something that would tear the illusion to pieces. Michael Lawson stepped out of the modest Airbnb he'd rented under a pseudonym, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored navy suit. At 43, he carried himself with the practiced ease of someone used to commanding attention, even when he didn't want it. Founder of Lawson Quantum Systems, a billionaire many times over, he'd chosen discretion that morning. No entourage, no press, just a man alone, on his way to a tech and education gala where he planned to quietly donate $5 million to schools in neglected communities. No ribbon cutting, no headlines, just impact. His polished Ferragamo shoes tapped lightly on the pavement as he approached his prized yellow Ferrari parked by the curb. He checked the time, 9:17 a.m., then reached for the door handle. The world was still silent, unbothered. He smiled faintly, pulled in a breath, and opened the door, unaware he was standing inches from death. Then came the scream, a sharp, splitting cry that didn't belong in any peaceful morning. "Don't get in the car." The voice was high and raw, flung with every ounce of urgency a child's lungs could muster. Michael froze mid-motion. His heart jerked. He turned instinctively and saw him, a little black boy, no more than 7, running barefoot across the street in a tattered green jacket, his eyes wide with terror, tears streaking down his cheeks. "Please, sir, don't," the boy cried, breath hitching as he stumbled to a stop just feet away. Michael's brows furrowed, disoriented. "What is it? What's wrong?" The boy's voice trembled, but didn't break. "There's something in there. Under the seat. I saw a man real early this morning. He put something in your car. A box. With wires. He wore gloves." Time stopped. Michael's breath caught in his throat. He looked back at the car, at the open door, the shadowed space beneath the seat. Slowly, he crouched, peering just far enough to glimpse something dark, something unnatural. A blinking red light. He shot up and stumbled back from the car, blood draining from his face. The silence of the morning shattered completely. The sound of birds, the sprinklers, the everyday comfort of suburbia. All of it fell away. There was only that light, and the boy who had seen it before him. In that instant, the peace of Woodland Heights was gone, replaced by sirens, black SUVs screeching into view, armed agents moving with military precision, neighbors peering from behind blinds. And one man, standing motionless on the curb, staring not at the bomb that nearly killed him, but at the small boy who, with a scream, had dragged the truth into daylight. ChatGPT said. His name was Jalen Brooks. Just 7 years old, with a tangle of curls above wide, searching eyes, Jalen stood on the lawn in his too-thin jacket, clutching the edge of his sleeve like a shield. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a boy who wasn't sure he'd done the right thing. His chest heaved with leftover panic. He kept glancing at Michael Lawson, as if expecting to be scolded, or worse, ignored. But Michael didn't speak. He couldn't, not yet. The weight of what almost happened, of what didn't happen because of this boy, sat like iron on his chest. Jalen's voice had cracked when he screamed. His eyes, when he ran, held no agenda, just terror and conviction. That kind of fear isn't taught. That kind of courage isn't either. "I saw him," Jalen whispered when Michael finally knelt in front of him. "Before the sun came up. A man in a hoodie. He crouched by your car. I thought he was stealing something, but then I saw the wires." Michael swallowed hard, nodding slowly. "You saw it all? From your window?" Jalen nodded. "I was drawing. I couldn't sleep. My mom works at the hospital, so I sit by the window sometimes." His voice grew even smaller. "I tried to call 911, but my tablet wouldn't load." The simplicity of it nearly broke Michael. A little boy had watched a crime unfold from the shadows of his living room, and when the moment came, when a man's life was one breath away from ending, he ran. No weapon, no certainty, just a scream. The device beneath the Ferrari's seat, as confirmed minutes later by Michael's security team and the police, was real. Sophisticated. Wired to detonate the moment the weight of a body hit the seat and the door shut. If Jalen had hesitated, if Michael had ignored him, it would have been over. A billionaire, gone in a flash of fire, with no warning and no chance to say goodbye. And yet it hadn't happened, because Jalen didn't walk away. He didn't let the world convince him that his voice was too small, too young, too invisible to matter. While the neighborhood buzzed with flashing lights and hushed shock, Jalen stood alone. No one beside him. His mother still asleep from a long overnight shift. His tablet dead. And the weight of something enormous pressing against his small shoulders. Michael reached out gently, placing a steady hand on the boy's back. "Hey," he said, soft and real. "You saved my life. Do you know that?" Jalen blinked at him, unsure. "Am I in trouble?" "No," Michael replied, voice tight with emotion. "You're the reason I'm standing here." The air between them held something quiet and profound. Jalen had no badge, no title, no reason to be brave. And yet, in a world full of adults trained to look away, he ran toward the danger. Sometimes, a hero doesn't wear a uniform. Sometimes, he's just a kid with a sketchpad, watching the world from a second-story window, trusting his gut and refusing to stay silent. ChatGPT said. The sun had fully crested the trees by the time Michael Lawson stood again, his breath catching as if gravity itself had changed around him. The warmth of morning was a lie now, an illusion shattered by the brutal weight of what they'd nearly missed. The Ferrari still sat where he'd left it, engine off, door ajar, the keys tossed absently on the driver's seat hours before. But now, a perimeter of yellow tape fluttered in the breeze around it, like some grotesque gift wrapping. Men in dark jackets and heavier eyes moved around the vehicle, crouching, murmuring into radios, tracing invisible lines across the leather and steel. Michael kept his distance, not out of fear, but reverence. Reverence for the life he almost lost. Reverence for the reality that evil had come for him, not abstractly, not metaphorically, but with wires, plastic, and calculated precision. The lead bomb technician, a grim-faced woman named Ramirez, approached him slowly, the outline of her vest casting a long shadow across the lawn. Her gloves were still on. She didn't speak right away. He met her eyes. It was real. She gave a single, heavy nod. "Yes, Mr. Lawson. It was real." He closed his eyes. "We neutralized the device. The trigger mechanism was pressure-sensitive, designed to activate with weight on the seat. Clean work. Not amateur. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." She paused. If that boy hadn't shouted, Michael shook his head before she could finish. He knew. He felt it in every muscle, every breath. The finality that had hovered inches from him. The death that had been crafted, not spontaneous. Someone had made a choice. Someone had planned it. And someone had planted it in the one place Michael never thought to be afraid, his own vehicle, his sanctuary. Jalen stood a few paces away, watching from behind a nearby tree, arms folded tight across his chest. He still hadn't gone home, still hadn't asked for anything, just watched, as if he needed to see the truth unfold to believe what he'd done had mattered. Ramirez crouched again near the car and came back holding a small, sealed evidence bag. Inside, a blackened circuit board glinted dully. Military-grade components. No prints. This wasn't a message. It was an execution attempt. Michael took the bag from her, stared at the thing that almost ended his life. It didn't look like much. Just wires. Plastic. Metal. And yet it was enough to erase a man in seconds. Enough to reduce everything he'd built, every hour he'd fought, into smoke and silence. But it hadn't. And that, more than anything, terrified him. He turned back toward Jalen. "I need to know everything," he said, his voice raw with something deeper than fear. deeper even than rage. Not just about the bomb.
About why?
About who? Ramirez hesitated. You think it was personal? Michael's jaw tightened. This wasn't just meant to kill me. It was meant to erase me. To leave nothing behind. That's not random. That's not business. That's hate. The wind moved through the trees with a sudden sharpness, and for a moment the world seemed to exhale with him. He looked back at the boy again, at the child whose voice had undone a death sentence, and in his eyes, he didn't see fear anymore. He saw something steadier, something harder. Conviction. The bomb had been found. The truth was no longer buried beneath leather seats and designer panels. But the questions had only begun. And Michael Lawson, survivor by chance and target by design, knew in his bones that the people who tried to kill him were watching, waiting. They had missed once. They wouldn't wait long to try again. The silence in Michael's study that evening felt different. Not peaceful. Not reflective. It was the kind of silence that waited, like an old wound reopened, like something forgotten clawing its way back through memory. The room was dim, lit only by a desk lamp that cast long, tired shadows across piles of files and folders. But Michael wasn't reading. He was staring. Not at the documents, but through them through time. It had been years. A lifetime almost. The man he was now bore little resemblance to the soldier he had once been. But that world, the one with sandstorms, coded transmissions, and men who didn't sleep unless one eye was open, never truly left him. It waited, just beneath the surface, like old blood on a blade. He pulled a dusty file from the bottom of the drawer. It had no label, only the faint emboss of a military seal long since faded. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from memory, as he opened it. Operation Hades. A mission buried by politics, shame, and silence. It had been classified, then redacted, then buried so deep even the survivors were encouraged to forget. But he hadn't. He couldn't. Inside the folder were photos.
Names. Coordinates.
A team of 5. One of them was him. Another, a ghost from the past, Kareem Haddad. Former insurgent turned double agent. A man Michael had trusted once. A man he'd been ordered to eliminate. Michael closed his eyes and saw it again. The ambush, the betrayal, the broken radio silence, and Haddad's voice, trembling but defiant, shouting from behind a wall of fire. You think this war ends when you leave? It follows you home, Michael. It always does. He'd thought Kareem died that night. Intelligence confirmed the body. DNA matched. But Michael had never seen the corpse. He'd never looked the ghost in the eye and watched the light go out. That had always unsettled him. And now, with a bomb under his seat and no clear suspect, the unease had grown into something colder. Something certain. The device had Middle Eastern construction logic, familiar signatures, familiar cruelty. Not a cartel. Not some jealous competitor. This wasn't about business. It was about memory. His phone buzzed. A single encrypted message from a contact he hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade. He's not dead. Istanbul. 2 nights. Roof of the Novice Hotel.
Come alone.
Michael's breath hitched. He stared at the message until it burned into the back of his skull. Kareem was alive. And if he was alive, then every word he screamed that night, about vengeance, about the war following him, had been more than just rage. It had been a promise. He rose from the desk slowly, walked to the far wall, and opened the hidden panel behind a bookshelf. Inside, wrapped in velvet and silence, was a worn pistol and a single dog tag that read LTC Michael Lawson, U.S. Army. He ran his fingers over the letters as if reacquainting himself with someone long buried. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a businessman, a philanthropist, a name on glossy magazines. But someone from the past had decided that wasn't enough. Someone wanted to remind him who he used to be, or who they believed he still was. Michael looked into the mirror above the fireplace. The man who stared back had tired eyes and deeper lines, but behind them, something fierce still lived. A soldier's spine, a hunter's patience, and a heart that still remembered every betrayal. He whispered it aloud, just to hear the truth in his own voice. Kareem Haddad is alive. And suddenly, the bomb wasn't the story. It was just the first move. The war had come home. The next morning, the sun rose over Charleston like a slow breath after a sleepless night. The city moved on, unaware that the quiet rhythms of its streets had brushed against something ancient, something forged in war, loyalty, and shadows. But within Michael Lawson's world, everything had changed. Again. He walked the long path down to the community center, a place he'd funded quietly over the years, built on the ashes of his guilt. It stood modestly, tucked between a shuttered diner and a boarded-up gas station. No headlines covered its opening. No plaques bore his name. That was by design. It wasn't about legacy. It was about penance, about giving, without ever asking for anything back. And yet, this morning, something waited for him there. As he approached the iron gate, he saw the boy, Tyrell, sitting on the steps, arms wrapped around a crumpled brown paper bag. His legs bounced nervously, but his eyes lit up when they met Michael's. Not with the innocence of a child, with something deeper.
Respect.
A quiet understanding. As if he knew now, without needing to ask, that the man before him was more than a businessman. That he was once something else. Something dangerous. And something good. Tyrell stood up, shoved the bag toward him. "I made you breakfast," he muttered, eyes low. "Well, my grandma did, but I helped." Michael accepted it gently, feeling the weight of the gesture more than the bag itself. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than usual. "That means more than you know." Tyrell looked up, his face unguarded for the first time. "I didn't tell anyone," he said quickly. "About the bomb. About what I saw. I figured if you wanted people to know, they'd already know." Michael's gaze lingered on him for a long moment. The boy had seen death waiting under a seatbelt, had warned a stranger, had chosen to be brave in a moment when most would have frozen or fled. But more than that, he'd chosen silence afterward, not out of fear, but out of loyalty. A kind that couldn't be taught. A kind that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. And yet, here it was, blooming in a forgotten part of town, from a boy no one paid attention to, except him. Michael knelt, setting the bag beside him. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said quietly. "A friend. He had your eyes. Same kind of fire. Same kind of heart." Tyrell tilted his head. "Was he a soldier too?" Michael nodded.
The best.
But he never liked talking about it. Said the real battles didn't happen overseas. They happened right here. He tapped Tyrell's chest gently. Inside. There was a stillness between them.
A peace.
Nothing grand or cinematic, just two people, one who had seen too much and one who had seen just enough, finding a bridge between generations. Suddenly, the door of the center creaked open. An elderly man with faded marine tattoos stepped out. Ray, a grizzled volunteer who knew more about pain than he ever admitted. He nodded at Michael. "They're all inside, waiting." Michael stood. "I'm not ready to tell them everything. Not yet." Ray shrugged. "You don't have to. They already know something's coming. They can feel it. We all can.
But they'll follow you.
Just like before." As Michael walked into the center, the smell of coffee and old floor wax wrapped around him like a memory. Veterans sat in folding chairs, some missing limbs, others just missing time. These were his people. Not by birth, not even by war, but by something older, pain, dignity, honor, and the silent promise to watch each other's backs when the world stopped caring. He didn't speak to them like a leader. He just nodded. And they nodded back. Nothing had to be said. The war had followed him home. But so had the brotherhood. And in the quiet glance of a child who believed in him, and the steady presence of men who remembered who he was, Michael Lawson felt something return. Not glory, not revenge, but belonging. And that, more than any bullet or bomb, was what gave him strength. The rain came down gently that afternoon, washing the streets of Charleston in a quiet rhythm, like a lullaby for a city that rarely slept. It tapped on the windows of the community center, where the old soldiers sat drinking bitter coffee and laughing in that low, broken way men do when they've survived too much. But outside, under the rusted awning, Tyrell stood beside Michael Lawson, holding a battered broom almost twice his size. Michael hadn't asked him to sweep. The boy had just shown up after school, his backpack half-zipped, shoes soaked, and started cleaning the steps. At first, Michael said nothing. Just watched him, leaning against the doorframe with the tired eyes of someone who had seen wars begin with silence, and now recognized the same power in an action so simple, so quiet, it nearly broke him. "Why are you doing this?" he asked finally, voice low, not wanting to embarrass the boy. Tyrell shrugged, without looking up. "Place deserves to look better," he said. "People come here for help. Shouldn't feel like no one cares." It wasn't the answer Michael expected. It was better.
Raw.
True. The kind of thing that didn't come from textbooks or programs, but from somewhere deeper, maybe the same place in the boy that had sensed the bomb, that had trusted a stranger in the dark. Michael stepped down the stairs slowly, rain dampening his shoulders. He took the broom from Tyrell without a word and began sweeping alongside him. Two figures, one weathered by war, the other still untouched by the sharp edges of the world, moving in rhythm, brush, lift, sweep, until the steps were clean and the gutter water flowed clear. Across the street, a woman paused beneath her umbrella and stared. Then, without speaking, she bent down and picked up a crumpled soda can from the sidewalk and tossed it in the trash. It was nothing, and it was everything. By evening, the veterans inside had noticed. One by one, they shuffled out and stood along the sidewalk, not saying much, just watching. One offered to repaint the front sign. Another started fixing the flickering light by the door. No one called it a project. No one declared a mission. It just happened, like trust returning to a place long abandoned by hope. Word began to spread, as it always does when something real begins to stir. A young teacher brought used books for a reading shelf. A mechanic from 2 blocks away volunteered to fix the center's old van for free. People didn't ask what the place was about. They just showed up because they felt something had shifted, not because of a speech, but because a boy had picked up a broom. Michael sat alone that night under the yellow porch light, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the city exhale. He thought about all the battles he'd fought, all the lives he couldn't save, all the days he'd spent wondering if the uniform he once wore had meant anything at all. And yet here, now, in the small act of a child choosing to care, something holy had returned. Not in the form of redemption, but in the shape of community. Reborn not through power, but through participation. Not through orders, but through example. He looked over as Tyrell came back out, now with dry socks and a sandwich in his hand. The boy offered half. Michael smiled, took it, and for a long time, they sat in silence. Not as a soldier and a kid. Not as a protector and the protected. But as equals in something bigger than both of them. A new beginning shaped not by grand gestures, but by the quiet, stubborn miracle of choosing to show up. And in that moment, Michael Lawson knew. This was how peace started. Not in treaties, not in flags, but in a broom, in a shared sandwich, in a city beginning to believe again.